To the first settlers, Carolina was a hospitable place, a natural greenhouse, where abundant rainfall and a semi-tropical climate encouraged the planting of exotic and valuable crops: indigo, rice, cotton. And as the settlers fanned out from the first population center at Charleston, they realized that this land they called Carolina was one huge watershed, an enormous drainage system for the southeastern section of the American continent. To the surprise of the early settlers, and even to Americans of today, this Carolina watershed is one of the largest east of the Mississippi River. And then, the Civil War, and the long days of Reconstruction, of poverty, of near ruin for Carolina. At the outset of the American Revolution, South Carolina was the wealthiest state in the nation. By 1865, the poorest. And as the nation marched with optimism into the 20th century, its cities loud with the noise of trolleys and motor cars, the entire fabric of our society was rapidly changing with the new high-speed transportation, communications and power resources to light homes, factories, and stores. In South Carolina, this new optimism emerged in the form of the Columbia Railway and Navigation Company. Chartered in 1913, this Midlands-based trade company ran a regular steamship service between Columbia and Georgetown. But these heavy-laden steamships were encountering rough waters and navigational hazards, particularly at the mouth of the Santee River. Then, the port of Georgetown was closed to commercial use during World War I, and an alternate route had to be found. Enter Thomas Clay Williams, the little man with the big idea. Williams was a partner in the steamship company. It was Williams who remembered the old canal, the story that had been so long forgotten it had passed into legend. It was Williams who went into the wilderness and traced the old canal with its locks, and braved the laughter and scorn of the business community, a fate far more dangerous than the malarial mosquitoes he encountered in the swamps. It was T.C. Williams who finally demonstrated that the 35-foot drop between the Santee and the Cooper was more than enough to generate much-needed electric power for the state. His persistence over a full decade finally paid off. In 1926, he was granted a Federal Power Commission license to build a new Santee Canal. Williams also brought industry to the state, most particularly the International Paper Company, which purchased the Railway and Navigation Company. And then the Depression brought a screeching halt to economic growth of any kind. The reality of the Depression interrupted the dream of a new canal, of usable inland navigation, and of electric power for all the people of South Carolina. A new, dark age had fallen. By 1930, electrification in South Carolina was concentrated in the urban areas. By comparison to other states, much of South Carolina was still in darkness. And then, in 1932, a first light for South Carolina's rural people appeared. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, governor of New York, was running for president. At the Chicago Convention, Roosevelt's people met with members of the South Carolina delegation who presented the idea of a canal linking the Santee and Cooper rivers and an electric generating station that would supply power to areas of the South Carolina low country. The idea was met with enthusiasm by the candidate, and during the presidential campaign, Roosevelt talked about the need for public power projects all over the nation.
The natural hydroelectric power resources belonging to the people of the United States or the several states shall remain forever in their possession.
One of the South Carolinians who attended that convention and met with the Roosevelt people was Richard M. Jeffries, then a senator from Colleton County and an early advocate of the project. Jeffries presented the original plan in the South Carolina Senate and served as general counsel during the lengthy litigation which followed. Charleston Mayor Burnett R. Maybank also attended the Chicago meetings in 1932 and returned home to join the fight to help the people of South Carolina. In 1933, after Roosevelt's election, a small group of state legislators, among them a young senator from Edgefield named Strom Thurmond, sponsored a bill creating a public power corporation. Overwhelmingly passed in the Senate, the bill was defeated in the House. But throughout the summer of '33, supporters of the bill canvassed the state. Committees were formed. Editorials supporting the project appeared. When the General Assembly convened the next year, a delegation was sent to Washington to work out details with the administration. The enabling legislation was passed in the South Carolina General Assembly on April 7, 1934, creating the South Carolina Public Service Authority, whose purpose was to construct and operate the Santee Cooper hydroelectric and navigation project. The legislation established the state-owned utility as a corporation completely owned by and to be completely operated for the benefit of the people of South Carolina, for the improvement of their health, welfare, and material prosperity. Finally, in the late spring of 1939, the legal hurdles were cleared. Land clearing began on 171,000 acres to create 2 mammoth lakes. The lakes would be formed by impounding the Santee River after 42 miles of dams and dikes had been built, and construction got underway. At Pinopolis, a 26-mile-long dike was built with local sand and clay, excavated from under the swamp muck which had stood for 1,000 years. Also at Pinopolis, the hydro station and navigation lock, the highest single-lift lock in the world. 60 feet wide and 180 feet long, to lift barges 75 feet from the tail race canal at the base of the dam to the surface of the lower lake. Down the tail race 4 miles away flowed the Cooper River, running to the sea. Santee Cooper purchased existing generating stations and lines to fulfill its mission to distribute low-cost electricity directly to customers in Berkeley, Horry, and Georgetown counties. It was a project of tremendous proportion, greater at the time than any state could afford. Its cost, $31 million, was 5 times the state's 1934 budget. All funds came from federal grants and loans, not 1 cent from the state. But though the money came from Washington, the heart of Santee Cooper was in South Carolina. The 2 mammoth lakes were named for Governor William Moultrie and General Francis Marion, 2 of the men whose vision helped build the original Santee Canal. In just 2.5 years, from the start of the clearing to the damming of the Santee, over 171,000 acres cleared, 42 million cubic yards of earth moved, 3 million yards of concrete poured. And in February of 1942, Santee Cooper generated its first electricity. 6 months later, all 5 power plant units at Pinopolis were in service. The vision of a route to the sea, the dream of water and power, the challenge of fulfilling that dream, the reality of Santee Cooper. All this was done by South Carolinians who dreamed it, who built it, who made it happen. And with Santee Cooper, they worked the miracle of public power owned by the people of South Carolina, the miracle of pushing back the darkness.